I'm just having issues with my boom mic. I think I mentioned it before, but there's this like disc kind of screw thing that connects the blue shock absorber that has the microphone onto the onto my Rode boom arm, and it's really annoying because it keeps coming loose a lot. That should work a bit better now. Microphone is like wobbling all over the place. Anyway, this is GeoWill, and we're back to continue this interesting thing I decided to do, this live stream of actually making a plugin in real time. So, earlier we were doing some work on it, and things got really just kind of messed up, and I decided to take a break to kind of let my brain cool down a bit, and then to work on those things off the stream so it didn't take up so much time. So I managed to fix it. There were there were a crap ton of things wrong with it, with the code. First of all, there are some things I'd overlooked, like, for example, A class here. Well, let's talk about something else entirely first. The main reason things weren't working was because of how this was functioning. So before, if we go back to the old code here, all that rec classes was an array that contained the class ID. That's all it was. It wasn't an object or anything, just the class ID, and that was it. And then we used that in conjunction with some other stuff to build the required levels, and that would object, and that would basically fill out the conditions for the class level requirements. What we tried to do here was reverse. We tried to make the rec classes array the rec levels object by saving both the values. So what was happening was we were actually throwing an object into this notation here, and it was throwing out name of undefined because, you know, how do you the interpreter doesn't know how to parse an object as like a value or something, so I couldn't find what it was looking for, and hence the undefined. So I fixed that, then realized that I had to then take something to, because there was a class called, well, no, it was Rex. That was it. Rex was used to generate the rec levels vector by using the Rex CLS and looping through that. So since now Rex has a bunch of crap in it because we've added all these other requirements that are not classes and added in the extra note identifier, we can't use that now. So I actually went through and then decided, okay, easiest thing to do, just build another object that's like Rex, does everything that Rex did, but is not Rex. So that's what this is about. Our classes is just the LE, which is element, so that's going to be the class ID, and then the level that's stored in the TR object underneath that element. And then we'll use that to find the required level, and then we just use the CLS of our classes to populate the class ID. So that rebuilds the rec levels properly. The second problem was I had a bunch of crap in here that was not right because of this stuff here. So like this window stuff here. Before, you'll remember this stuff here and this stuff down here was all in the all within the draw rec items function or whatever in window class info. Since it's in here now, we have to internalize it to this. What I had done was I'd internalized the X and the Y to process requirements, and because of that, there was no way for the values to pass through over to here unless I passed them through in as a parameter. I wasn't going to do that though, because that just opens up a lot of problems, because not everything uses that, and it's really a niche thing just for this particular instance. I could have done it, but it would have been pretty messy. It's already kind of messy because CLS window in some cases is null, and if you're not handling this properly in here, you get a lot of undefined errors because of that, and that was part of the other issue. So A class, as you notice, this is new. ACLSS was not being passed through. and because of this, I never figured it out until I fixed that problem with the rec classes object. So, because it was never hitting this, and it was never hitting any of this either. So it was never hitting all these other issues that I found. But the oh, and I forgot to add in the type here for the draw rec item function calls to window information, window class information. So remember, we changed that to add in the type because now we have all these different types we need to handle. So I did that here. But yeah, so this was always coming up as null because there was no value for it. And then I attempted to use just this to call it, but then I realized that wasn't going to work because other things other than the class information, window class information, call this. And so that's why I did in this pass here. So pass it through, and so every class that needs to call this or that does call this will pass this through, and we'll be able to process this. So after all of about 45 minutes of work, debugging and whatnot, finally got it to work again the way it should, except for this. I mean, I had to figure this out. This still doesn't work. The highlighting for the list, but everything else works, as you can see. Also found a slight bug that was a bug in the way that we did the code now, because it wasn't being because the information window refresh wasn't being called enough. So before, because of some weird magic, I guess, the way it was working was that it wasn't having any issue with it. But when I moved the code around the way we did here, it made it so that this window would, so if I just unselected it, canceled out of that and selected it again, none of this would draw because the refresh wasn't called. And so the newly selected value, or newly selected item here wasn't being updated into here. I guess somewhere in here the selected items being set to, selected class being set to 0 or something. Or it's somehow being changed, and it wasn't calling the refresh on this to refresh the contents. So I fixed that. So we do have our dance class here, dancer class, and right now all that's showing is the novice requirement because all we have right now is the classes. All the work that I've done up until this point was just to get the system working the way it was before we jacked it all up. Now we have to do some new jacking, because now we need to deal with handling all the other requirements. So we've done classes, now we need to do all of these. Gender will probably be the easiest to deal with, but at the same time, who knows? Where to start? What are we gonna need? So, we're gonna need for gender. We're gonna need the new thing I set up for the actors that stores their gender. I forget what it's called now. These might be pretty straightforward. All we need to do is we need to find out if the party has this item, and we have this item ID in here. So really all we'd have to do is just create, I don't even think we need to do an object, to be honest. We could probably just create a, we could just store it as the actual item ID inside of required items or weapons or armor. And then if those are not null, add them down here to the checks to figure out what we need and what we don't have. Which is also going to be interesting because now this is going to get much longer because now we have to handle each of these individually. That's why I have this here. All this code here that you see right now pretty much is just for classes. We have to then handle all this stuff for all the other ones. The interesting thing is going to be how to handle that and where some opportunities for, you know, what should be the... So what I'm thinking is that, well, the question is what should take precedence? So should classes take precedence or should these other ones take precedence? If classes take precedence, then can we shoehorn the other stuff into this here somewhere without having to create some new kind of structure for this? Or can we just simply say if game party dot get item or check item or whatever it is to check to see if they have that item is, you know, return 0, they don't have it, then just do true or false on the display or return true or false on the can change. It may just be that simple, it may not be. We'll have to see. For sure, it's not going to be as complicated as with classes because you got all this different stuff to check out. You got the level requirements and the coming out of a JSON object list that you have to then parse down to various levels and then compare everything against each other, and then also against something that's related to the actor. Whereas this stuff is related to specifically just the actor, and then just the party thing, the party item list, whatever they call that. So these ones are going to be relatively simple, maybe. Next question, though, is, okay, so what about for weapons and armor? So in these cases, you would say maybe, okay, so if they're equipped on the particular actor that you're working with, then they can change that class, or only can change that class. So these get a little more complicated. Item will be pretty much simple because you just check if it exists. Simple as that. These we have to deal with checking if they're equipped or not. I'm not trying to do that because I never actually looked into the code for that, so we'll be looking into that as well. So let's go ahead and create like a list of things we need to do here so I can keep track of stuff. Alright, actually we'll just go to TextPad. That's the easiest place to do it in. So first thing we have to do is, add item restriction. I can't see because my microphone's in front of the keyboard again. Let's see. Well, now I can't see the screen. So let's go lower. And the pops filter's kind of in the way. Okay, I can kind of see a little better now. Restriction. Okay, so add item restriction. Code. Look into equip checking. Add weapon and armor checking restriction code. Then add gender restriction code. And then finally, new plugin commands. Commands or command? I guess one command for now. Well, we'll say commands, question mark. So the one that I do want to add, though, is whether or not, add a plugin command that will allow plugin command and /param that will allow the user, I guess the people using the plugin are users, not specifically the users of the game, but the ones building the game. Allow the user to change the functionality of the weapon armor restriction system so that either the armor or wep will disable all other class changes, I guess, or unlock a specific class for changing without for changing. And then I guess there should also be another one then. Add a plugin command param that will allow the user, to change the functionality of the previous plugin so that either the so that when either the weapon /armor requirement overrides existing class requirements, if any, or is in addition to those requirements. So basically, the first plugin would allow you to either make the weapon or armor restrictions, like as we're talking about before, either make all other classes, like in the case of like a cursed weapon, make all other classes locked off, and you can only go to that one class for maybe a bunch of power or something on the weapon. Or if it just unlocks a class, is used to unlock a class to change to, but doesn't unlock anything else. So more like maybe the asterisks from Bravely Default. The second one, though, is whether or not that the requirements for those then become either that they overwrite the existing requirements. So in other words, if you have like a cursed item, for example, and you can change only to one class, does that class you can change to still need to have the other requirements? Now, in that case, it's probably not going to be used for that, because in that case, what are the chances you're going to have all the requirements to meet for that class, for example, if there are other requirements? So I would say that in that case, they would always overwrite what it's the existing items. And of course, that would be set by using these plugin command/params. Or maybe we create a new, of course it's adding a lot more, another level of complexity, but add a new tag element to the tags that says if a armor or weapon requirement is locked or unlocked. So locked would mean that the that requirement would be really locked or unlocked. So that really, I guess, not locked and unlocked, but it would be something similar to say like if it was takes precedence or doesn't take precedence, whatever word I can find, single word description I can use that will be able to explain that, and put those there instead, and then have them dealt with in the code. I'd rather not do that if possible. Or we can say that this is part of the same plugin, so to speak, but it's two different plugin command parameters, but it's two different sections. So the first one allows you to create like just well, I mean, either I don't know how to really explain this properly. Or, well, I'm looking at this thinking of different ways it could be applied and thinking of bad ways it could be applied. I think it should be like this. There's no way to like combine the two and into like part A and part B of a thing, because this does its own specific thing, this does a different specific thing. This functionality, let's see, where overrides existing requirements. So I think that's kind of inherent in this, though, isn't it? I mean, so if it's like a if it's like a cursed weapon, you should only be able to change that class when you have that weapon. And maybe that would be up to the game developer to then have the clarity to say, okay, if this is going to be a cursed weapon, I don't want any other requirements except for this weapon requirement or something. On the other hand, doing this means that every weapon or armor equipment armor or weapon tag would then make it a cursed in air quotes weapon. That would lock it to that specific class and not any other class. I don't think plugin commands are good for this. I think what we're gonna have to do is we're gonna have to maybe this, but not this. This is gonna have to be on a per item basis. This though, so we'll see. Now add new code for armor and wep restrictions to handle maybe just restricted, unrestricted. Handle restricted and unrestricted. restricted attributes. So if a weapon is if a class has a restricted weapon, that means that that weapon will restrict you to only that class. If it's unrestricted, that means that it unlocks a class for you to use. And then with this plugin command / parameter, you can say, okay, if you find this item and you have it and you use an unrestricted with it, you can say, okay, this item will allow you to change to this class without meeting the requirements. Problem there is, though, let's say you change to it. Well, it won't matter, because if you change to it once, the code will allow you to change to it again, because it's in your actor class list. So that doesn't matter, because then if you lose the weapon or the item, you would not be able to change back to it. The question is, should that be the case? If you don't meet the requirements to change to that class, but you've been that class, albeit with an item, should you be able to return to that class without that item, even though you don't meet the requirements? Now, the way I have it coded is yes. The answer to that is yes. The actual question, though, is should that happen? So if we were going to make that not happen, we would have to check. No, so if we did that, then we'd have to remove that code or make that code more complicated and have it do its own check. That's no. So if you've been a class once, you can go back to the class even if you don't have the items. So that's fine. So yeah, I think, and then so this one then would kind of modify what this does in terms of the requirements. So if you again, we're talking about this again though, but I think this would only be in the case of unrestricted. Previous weapon. No, the way that I just explained it just stated that this is not relevant anymore either. So maybe no new plugin commands for that at all. Okay, so that's good. We removed the plugin command stuff entirely. So I think that's probably the best way to think of it. So an armor or weapon can either be used as no, because so even if it's unrestricted, if it's restricted, the rest of the requirements don't matter. That's just for this part. For unrestricted though, you still have to choose if the item is, and again, this is kind of like a item per item basis maybe. If the item is going to be in addition to the other requirements or in place of the requirements. So maybe we do two new attributes for the weapon tag, or the weapon requirement tag. So restricted, unrestricted, and then maybe, so you have restricted and unrestricted. We'll call this replace and replace, yeah. Repulse. I don't know. Repulse. It's false. It's fast all over again. Replace and maybe then say normal, I guess. So normal means that it's just another requirement in the list of requirements. Replace means that it's replacing the existing requirements for just this one. So let's say like for the dancer class we created that item. Well, let's say that you can normally become a dancer, but you have to have novice level 10 and some other stuff as well. But if you have that item that I made, you can become a dancer right away. So of course, that would replace everything except for the gender stuff. So let's make a note of the stuff. So notes on above attributes. So don't forget this. So restricted. This item locks all other, well, this item, this class requirements locks all other classes, even if you can change to them or have been them. overrides any other except gender. So, if we have this, we want to make a gender-specific class that's tied to a restricted weapon tag or armor tag. So yeah, it would have to. So gender would still have to be a requirement that would be handled. So unrestricted. So this class requirement becomes just a normal class requirement. So in other words, well, I think we don't even need that. We just need to say replace. Replace attribute. That is used in addition to all the other requirements. Getting a little bit kind of meta here, but that's what it has to be. If you want to make this really kind of extensible and or not so limiting in terms of what becomes restricted and unrestricted, or what replaces attributes, what doesn't, so you can have all this stuff in the same game with using the plugin without having to have everything be the same. So you can have restricted and unrestricted weapons or armor. You can have weapons or armor that replace the attributes or don't replace the attributes, so on and so forth. Instead of having everything do everything, like everything be restricted, everything be unrestricted, or everything be replaced or not replaced. Replace. This class, it's a requirement attribute. It's not a requirement specifically. Let's make sure I add this. So weapon class, weapon requirement attribute. Well, wep armor. This class wep armor. Wow. Determines if a requirement overrides all other requirements except gender for the given class, I guess. Still the same thing, so basically the same thing as what restricted does, except for unrestricted items. So you can have an unrestricted item that, unrestricted weapon or armor requirement that either can be in addition to the existing or be as a replacement to the existing minus the gender requirement for either of those. So no new plugin commands, actually, yeah. That works. Okay, so first though, we need to tackle this stuff. So, add item, okay, item restriction code. So we can just use what we used. Okay, so actually no, I do want to go up here. I was going to where I wanted to go to. I just had forgotten why for half a second. I want to find where we're actually removing the items based on the cost. Here, this one. So, or no, we want the check. We don't want to remove them. We want the check. I was going to the wrong place. Item. So, where are you?